Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for joining me this afternoon. I've got a great stream with a great guest that I think you're really going to enjoy. If you've been paying any attention to the news, then you know that California has been experiencing some very crazy wildfires, and in particular, the LA County area is really getting hit. You have a lot of celebrities posting pictures from their homes, some that have burned down, some that are getting very close. You have a large number of people who have lost property, many people have died. There's quite the disaster going on, and everybody's ready to point fingers, but I think the best thing to do is to get a report from somebody who's on the ground, and luckily one of our previous guests, Peachy Keenan, who's a great author and writer, is in the Palisades over there, and she is ready to join us. Peachy, thank you so much for coming on.
Hi, thank you. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. So we'll get into, I guess, how all this started in a second, but where are things now? How many fires are burning? Are people safe from looting? What is the situation like on the ground right now?
Yeah, so I actually am not in the Palisades. I am in Altadena, which is other fire zone, but I grew up in the Palisades. So I've been posting about both areas. The Palisades is my hometown. My childhood home, the village burned down. My mother's old home in Big Rock, Malibu burned down. And basically everyone I know in the Palisades is now homeless. And a lot of people got evacuated and are still evacuated. And it's a disaster. So here in Altadena, all the way across town, I'm an hour east. I'm by the Rose Bowl, the Pasadena, just sort of Altadena is like this beautiful little nook just north of Pasadena where they have the Rose Parade and the Rose Bowl. Basically everything north of me is gone. The entire business district, on Lake Avenue, the big north-south road through Pasadena and Altadena is basically gone on both sides, north of approximately New York Drive. And I'm basically a block away from the military evacuation zone. So we're home. We were evacuated for 2 nights. We came back because my dogs were here. My husband actually stayed behind, strapped, because we heard about all the looters. And this morning on a press conference, I heard that they arrested 30 people yesterday for looting. People are dressed up as firemen to go into people's homes here in Altadena and in the Palisades. Altadena is not as wealthy. It's more middle class, but people are still looting. And everyone is waiting to come back to their house. I have a lot of friends who live near me whose house has survived, but they've been out of their homes for now a week with all their kids. Kids don't have their school uniforms, their backpacks, clean underwear, all that stuff. They're not letting people in apparently because they're going house by house looking for bodies, and which I found out today, and they keep finding them. So I heard on the news today this morning, West Altadena, which is a historically Black neighborhood. This is not just rich white people. This is a lot of lower middle class Black families in West Altadena. There was a grandpa and his son are both died in the fire. I mean, this is it's real. I think a few dozen people I think are dead in this area alone. So it's crazy. There's National Guard guarding every intersection. Today I took the kids to school. School reopened, and we headed west. And I had to dodge armed army guys the whole way through. It was crazy. It's really wild out here.
Yeah, I'm surprised that schools are open that early. When you have a devastating thing like this, the hardest thing is really traversing the roads, and so a lot of times you have an extended shutdown. You said the air quality was pretty rough right now. What's it like breathing out there?
It was horrible. The first 2 days we had migraines, nausea. So we got out of here, but even south of us was still bad. I almost went to Manhattan Beach by the beach to get away, but my friends were coming back because they said the air was actually worse there. Then it got much better. So the last day or two has actually been blue skies. You can breathe. Last night got a little sketchy again. And so, we have the air purifiers going. They're all sold out everywhere. So you have to kind of wait if you want to do that. We just have fans going and keeping the windows closed. So I'm just I'm ventilating the city air right now with my lungs. So you're welcome. But we don't have anywhere else to go. So we're just kind of, staying.
So obviously California is a place that's known for wildfires. This isn't a brand new phenomenon. In Florida, where I live, we have hurricanes, and obviously we know they're coming for a while. You have the option of getting ready and writing it out or evacuating, but you have a buildup, a notice usually. You don't just have a hurricane kind of pop into your area. A lot of people are blaming climate change. Obviously, this is the first thing that the left does. Oh, we've never seen a fire in California before. Brand new phenomenon. How much warning did you have that this was coming? When did you know that this was going to be making its way to areas you live, to the homes of people you know?
We had basically no warning. In the Palisades, the fire started up in the Highlands, which is like a kind of like adjacent neighborhood really up in the hills with only one in and out. So apparently it started off a hiking trail up there. So all day we were kind of watching the news and people evacuating from the Highlands, but never in a million, which has had a few fires. And obviously Malibu does every few years burn down. Half of Malibu burns down. But the Palisades village has never burned. And the idea that fire would come that far down to Mescal, to Pali High, all the way to the beach, it wiped everything down to the water, gone, is totally unthinkable. So we were watching the news all day Tuesday, like, oh my gosh, our friends are getting out of the Palisades. Oh no, like, I hope everyone's okay, but not really panicked about it at all. So all my kids were home. My oldest was home from college. And we were all sitting around. This is last Tuesday night. It was about 8 p.m. We're all watching the news, kind of glued, like, wait, the Palisades village is on fire. Like, how is this happening? And then my husband, like, tapped me on the shoulder and he, like, showed me his phone. And he had just gotten an alert that Eaton Canyon was on fire. Because I'd been sitting there all day going, well, that's so far from us. We're totally fine. Like, too bad for the Palisades, but we're okay. Eaton Canyon is up here. It's right next to me. It's down the street. It's a very well-known kind of like a ravine and a trailhead here in East Altadena, right above Pasadena, that leads up into these beautiful hiking trails. It's like famous hiking. There's waterfalls. It's quite lovely. My kids have gone camping up there many times. And so I see this alert around 8 p.m. on Tuesday, and I'm like, that's crazy. Like, let's go to the front yard. Like, let's see what we can see. Thinking, obviously, that we wouldn't see anything, that's like about a mile from me. I walk out to the front yard. It's dark now. And to my surprise, the entire sky behind my street is bright red. The whole sky, like close. And we went inside and we were like, okay, I don't know how close that is. My husband went up to walk around and look around, and he came with my older son, and he came back and said, like, let's pack our bags because this is actually looks like it might be coming down. The kids started to panic. And I have to say that from 8 p.m. until about 10 p.m. when we evacuated was probably the scariest 2 hours of my life. My little kids were like freaked out. Like, they were fully suitcase. Like, they just packed, grabbed whatever they could. And I was like, is this happening? This is like so hard to believe. This is not a fire zone. There was a few fires way in the Angeles Crest Hills, those mountains, the mountaintops, every few years there'll be a fire up near Mount Wilson, the observatory, which I think is still standing, which I can see from my house, but never in a billion years. These houses are over 100 years old. This is like old Craftsman, Pasadena. These houses have lasted. They've survived earthquakes and all these things. So it's totally unthinkable that we would have to evacuate for fire. And so we packed the bags. By the time we left the house, it was about 10:30 on Tuesday night. You could see flames in the blocks, a couple blocks north of us. Like, you could actually see live flames. And the winds at that point were something I've never experienced. It was like, my analogy was like, I felt like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz trying to open the storm cellar, but the winds like won't let her. Like, that was me trying to open the car door to the minivan. Like, it was so intense, branches coming down. At that point, the kids were like screaming. So we're just like, get in the car. We just got whatever we could. We actually had to leave the dogs. We didn't have room for them. We left the door open. We were going to come check on them, but my husband wanted to get us out of, the fire. And so we just had this like caravan, my teenage son in his car in front of us. We packed whatever we could, photos and all that, and got to my friend's house a couple miles south of us and just watched the alerts all night. I was up all night seeing alerts of these houses burning that I know very well, and just feeling just an intense amount of panic. And it's been like a blur since then. And now I'm on the edge of a FEMA disaster zone, which is a very unusual and new. I didn't imagine that 2025 would start like this.
Yeah, I've interviewed, been a part of many FEMA recoveries. It's never a great place to be. The winds you mentioned there, is that a relatively new thing? Is that something you've experienced before? Is that a function of the fire or a seasonal weather pattern? What the winds have been attributed to a lot of kind of the speed at which this fire has spread. Was that unique to you, or have you seen that before?
Yeah, it was unique. I mean, the Santa Ana winds is what they're called. They're like a famous feature of living in Southern California. They happen usually in the fall, which is what makes the fire danger worse because it gets really dry. in the fall before the rain starts. And so the Santa Anas are basically every year, there'll be like some strong winds. They go from east to west. They blow from the mountains down to the beach. Most of the wind in LA is like, offshore, comes in from the ocean, cools everyone off, keeps everything nice and balmy out here. But the Santa Anas are these like very ferocious winds that we get. Usually it's a few days, a day or two. And they're not ever like 70, 80 miles an hour. It's maybe 30, 40 miles an hour. Maybe in the mountain passes, it would get more extreme. I've never experienced it felt like a tornado was like going around me. So it was more extreme. And obviously that's why I think the fire became like a blowtorch.
So how many total fires did they identify at one point? And do you know how many they've been able to reduce it to at this point?
There was the Palisades, which then went over to Brentwood to Mandeville Canyon, just a little east of there. The Altadena fire, or they're calling it the Eaton Canyon fire. And then there was one in Hollywood that was put out. And then there's one in the Valley that was put out. So as far as I know, these are the two. There might be one way out in Santa Clarita that's actually not a big deal. In terms of the Palisades, I think it's like maybe 30% contained. It's still going. And here in Altadena, as far as if you look out and see, there's no smoke, there's no visible fire going on anywhere. But I see this morning on the way back from school, like right in front of me was like 50 crews from all over the state heading north. And then my friend who lives up the street from me said that on her block, there are still houses burning. There's still like smoldering, like hot spots. So nothing is like in full inferno right now. But up here, just off lake, there are major hot spots. So that's like a concern, because apparently tonight into Tuesday night into Wednesday will be more 40, 50 mile an hour winds. So I'm really praying and hoping that they manage to, at least on this residential side of the mountain, protect whatever is left.
Yeah, containment is a very tricky thing. Like you said, you think you have things locked down. You think that at least you have the residences out of the path of possible expansion, and then something like a wind can completely blow that back open. So it's a very difficult situation. And this is probably a good time to talk about the actual firefighting. So a lot, again, has been put on climate change, and I'm not somebody who is entirely skeptical of the fact that that people can have an impact on the climate, and they can, that we need to be good stewards of the land, that we need to care about the environment. Those arguments don't fall on my ears completely deaf. However, it's very clear that many of the policies that have been put in place by California governance has really hindered the ability of them to, one, control the outbreak of fires, and to fight them when they occur. It's my understanding that due to different environmental concerns, there is a lack of care of the forest. They're not dredging them out. They're not raking them out. The underbrush is not burned away on a regular basis. And so this adds to the possibility that when fires occur, they can really get out of control.
Yeah, that's my understanding too, and I think Donald Trump has talked about this in regards to his criticism of Gavin Newsom, our governor, that they're not clearing the forest like they used to. They would do controlled burns. They would really manage it well. And now, because they don't want to hurt the endangered ground squirrel or whatever, the little beetle, they don't do that as much. And so they let the vegetation rise and rise. However, in terms of I think Bernie Sanders was like, we have to find the people who did this climate change. It's like we had the last 2 winters in a row, we had the highest rainfall on record. And I remember when that was happening, we were just like getting deluged, right? And everyone's like, okay, well, the drought is over. Thank goodness. They can't say we're in a drought anymore and restrict our water use. But where's all this water going? It sure would be nice to have all this water captured so that when there is an inevitable fire or a drought or a shortage, we have all this water. Billions of gallons were just rushing through all the channels down the LA River, and they just go right into the ocean. They have like no way of capturing. They have a few old reservoirs, but they have no way of capturing this water. I was actually shocked to see that the closest reservoir to Pacific Palisades, which was on the news, it was empty. It was empty. They were repairing it or something. And that is the reservoir that is supposed to feed all those fire hydrants in Pacific Palisades. They ran dry on the night of the fire at 3 a.m. There was no more fire. No more water. No more water. No more water in your hose. No more water in the fire, whatever. And so why was that reservoir dry? Why isn't there another reservoir? Why isn't there a local reservoir here in Altadena? I don't know where they're getting the water from in Altadena, but I do know that we have water. We can't drink it. But the morning of the fire, very early Wednesday morning, before everything was closed off, my husband ran up like to see our friends' houses because they were like, "Are we homeless? Like, what's the deal?" And so he went up there and he took this incredible video of their home, which was kind of, the backyard was on fire, but the house was still there. And he said that he tried to put out some spot fires with the hose, but there was no water in any of their hoses. A friend of mine, a couple, they just had a baby. They got out safely. They live a few streets north of me in Altadena. The husband went back, very intrepid guy. He had a pickup truck. He powered his sprinklers with his truck and then had some kind of bucket brigade with a neighbor. And they rigged up some kind of hose system. I'm not sure what they used. And him and one neighbor all night saved their block, all except for, I think, one house. And so their house stands, and they got lucky because people were, and I hear story after story of that, of like these homeowners, and there was no fire truck the whole night, the whole day. There was nothing. And I went up and looked, and I saw women with hoses doing their, trying to get their houses out. And I saw a couple trucks, but there was just not, that you could see there was not enough resources. If there had been more trucks in that area, it would have saved more homes. And right now they're actually going door to door looking for bodies. So it would have saved lives. I don't know what the reason is, why there weren't that many trucks, but we've all seen those reports now of how the mayor of LA and the governor, they've defunded all of these fire departments and diverted the money to DEI programs. And they even sent our excess fire equipment to Ukraine. So, I mean, it's like, actually, that would have been really nice to have.
Yeah, that's called treason. That's criminal. And I will avoid Fed posting on stream. However, that is the category that belongs in, with all intended punishments. That is an absolute betrayal of the people that you serve, for no other interest than to kind of signal to the popular zeitgeist about being a great person and helping some foreign country you don't even know about. And so it's just absolutely insane and gross. And you pointed out that the initiatives that have been started by so many of these California governments. I mean, the mayor of LA wasn't even in LA during this, right? She was like in Ghana. She was in West Africa, because right. That's where you would put the mayor of an American city, because that's the way we conduct business. But it particularly striking has been the response, I think, from so many of kind of the state functionaries and even the fire departments. There's I think an assistant fire chief in LA who, basically when there was a large amount of kind of criticism, because it's hard not to notice that the LA fire department is run by a lot of lesbians. It's very strange that just the most qualified for people in all of LA just all happen to be happen to be lesbians to run a fire department. And she was being questioned about the wisdom of kind of forcing women into these roles of firefighters, and said, well, could an average woman doing this job carry a man out of a fire? And her response was something like, well, if your husband put himself in a place where I need to carry him out of a fire, that's his problem.
Right.
And it's like, no, that's literally your job. That's the entire job. What you're saying is you can't do the job at all, and you're the person in charge of this whole thing.
Yeah, I saw that too. I mean, that's like the number one requirement, right? Like,
right.
All your gear on, and you can climb a ladder and haul an unconscious adult male out of a house. That seems to be the number one requirement. Like,
it's literally called the fireman's carry. Like, that's literally the name of the move, to put someone over your shoulders and carry them out.
And I tweeted this today, but like every guy I've seen in the trucks today, this morning, heading up there, I saw a lot of straight white guys. I saw a lot of guys with like goatees, the kind of guy you want fighting fire. That's who I saw. I did not see a lot of lesbians of color. So I don't know what that means. Should I report that to the authorities? Like, where's the diversity? When you're dying, when you're burning alive in your home, don't you feel better knowing that you did because a lesbian of color got to have a job in like a cool uniform?
Well, and that was her line, is like, well, you want someone who looks like you rescuing you. No, I want someone who can rescuing me. I don't care how they look, as long as they're carrying my butt out of the fire. Like, that is the qualification, as you point out, that I want the most.
Right. I think that DEI, if it comes to like, who's teaching the ceramics class at the local college, okay, fine. You want to do DEI. There are certain jobs that are life and death that we can't, they have to be meritocratic. These include firemen. These include surgeons. These include airplane pilots. The guys flying the big tanker, planes full of the pink stuff that they dropped. One went over my house this morning. I guarantee you the pilot of that airplane was probably a, heterosexual male. There's no DEI when it comes to that job. Flying these crazy maneuvers, these aerial helicopter pilots are doing like these incredible kind of heroic maneuvers. And it's just the old adage, DEI is DIE.
Yeah, I'm still amazed. Like, I know that this cultish behavior has taken over. I practically understand it. I've been in the middle of bureaucracies where the mission has been sacrificed specifically for these goals. But it is still stunning to me when you, as you point out, this isn't teaching ceramics. This isn't accumulating, English literature. This is people burning to death. And when you have that kind of job, the fact that this insane suicidal ideology has worked its way even into these critical positions like police, like firefighters, like the military, it's the stuff that it was never supposed to touch, right? This is what we always heard is, oh, well, it's just a bunch of crazy kids coming out of college and maybe they'll take over a humanities department or even the, advertising over at Target or something. But, when it's people's lives on the line, when it's life and death, when it's a clutch moment, hard sciences, virology, police, firefighters, military, none of this will be touched. This is the core of what makes the society function. We would never hollow that out just to give a bunch of people jobs because they, screw the right person or have the right anatomy. And apparently we'll literally just burn civilization down to promote this stuff.
Yeah. And this is a case where, virtue signaling doesn't matter, voting for people because it makes you feel good because they're liberal, they have the right color, they check the box. You get to feel good about yourself as a liberal for voting, for example, like Karen Bass, this completely incompetent, unqualified woman to be the mayor of the second biggest city in the country. It feels good, and then suddenly you never think that vote will matter. Nothing will ever change in LA. It's just going to go business as usual. So you might as well vote for someone like Karen Bass or someone like Gavin Newsom. Until this week, it suddenly mattered a lot. Suddenly, it actually mattered a great deal, whether you lived or died, whether your house burned down. And this is the first time that kind of like, the kind of rich elite of LA figured that out. And they're now faced with the consequences of their decisions. Now, in their defense, a little, okay, Pacific Palisades, yes, overwhelmingly voted for Gavin Newsom, Joe Biden. These are a lot of celebrities, a lot of upper middle class and rich people. But interestingly, in 2022 in LA City, I'm not in LA City, in Pasadena, it's a different system, but Pacific Palisades is part of LA City. So Mayor Bass is their mayor. The election in 2022 for mayor was between her and Rick Caruso, who is a kind of a centrist, moderate Republican. He's a real estate developer. He's kind of like LA's Donald Trump. He built the beautiful malls in LA, the Grove by Farmers Market, the Americana in Glendale, the new mall in the Palisades Village. And his malls are very high end. They're very luxurious. They're very popular. They're open air. And one of them in Midtown got looted during the George Floyd riots. And so he hired like private security to go in and stop. They were smashing the Nordstrom's glass, all that stuff. And so he shut that down. He was like on top of that. And he ran on that as mayor. Like, this, we can't have this. LA needs law and order. We cannot have women like Karen Bass running these things, running the city into the ground. Pacific Palisades voted for Rick Caruso, a Republican, something like 65% to 35%. Gwyneth Paltrow came out to support Rick Caruso. People like the Kardashians came out to support Rick Caruso. People who are kind of generic, probably liberals. I don't really know. Although the Kardashians, who knows? They might be based at this point. And so the Palisades tried to vote themselves out of the mess that basically years and years of voting for Democrats had put them in. because really quality of life issues have degraded here in LA so much that even if you're in one of these wealthy enclaves in Malibu or the Palisades or Brentwood, even if you're in these enclaves, it's everywhere now. And there's tents in Santa Monica. Santa Monica has because which is where all those people shop and that's where you have all the big like movie theaters and the malls and stuff. That's now basically a deserted homeless camp. It was completely looted in 2020. It was, and to this day, some stores are still boarded up 4 or 5 years later in downtown Santa Monica. And then in their schools, they saw what was happening with gender ideology and gender indoctrination. So these, and the Palisades is you say what you will, they're liberals, yes, but they're basically traditional. Like they're there for their family. It's mostly married mothers and fathers with their kids. And so they were trying to hide there in the Palisades from the bad policies that they probably spent years supporting just because it didn't matter.
Right.
And now they are they're reaping what they sowed.
Yeah, we obviously saw a lot of this with the illegal immigration question, right? You had a lot of cities like New York and Chicago who, we're sanctuary cities. We're so compassionate. Well, mainly because we're not a border state and we never have to deal with this. And then all of a sudden, Greg Abbott and Ron DeSantis start, sending some diversity up north so they can enjoy the blessings. And all of a sudden it turned out that maybe mass immigration isn't good for New York either. And Eric Adams is, a super lefty, but even he recognizes a disaster when it lands on his doorstep. And, that didn't mean that New York went for Trump, but you could feel a shift, right? You could feel the shift that more people in New York were opening themselves up to this opportunity. You saw shifts among Hispanics and other voters in the direction of Trump because they recognize that ultimately an open border is bad for them and their children, the American dream that they want to be a part of. I gotta say, I'm skeptical that we're going to see a Republican LA, but do you think that being exposed to the consequences, no longer being able to hide behind the gated communities, of kind of the consequences of those policies, do you think that that's going to end up shifting the political dynamic in California in any way?
I think it actually will. Now, will we be a red state like it was in my lifetime? California was a red state like up through the late 80s, basically. Will it be red anytime soon? No. Could it be purple in 8 years, in 12 years? Yes. LA City, now the neighborhoods like the Palisades that got burned out, those voters have moved and they're not coming back. The people with families will not go back. They'll go to the OC, they'll go up to Ventura County, but most of them will probably stay in California for jobs. And this is our home. People live in California for a reason. It's kind of nice here. But politically, things have already been changing, triggered by the November election. And so it's actually been unbelievable to watch. The owner of the LA Times, maybe you saw this story. He's a very wealthy Korean businessman. He's owned the LA Times for a few years. He kiboshed the editorials that were endorsing Kamala Harris for president in the LA Times. And the LA Times is basically like Pravda. It's like, Marxist, red sheet. Like it's so left wing that people just read it as a joke. No one really reads it. Very low readership, basically. But he bought it, and apparently he woke up like Jeff Bezos did, like all these kind of like tech bros did. He kind of woke up too. And so he didn't let them endorse Kamala Harris in the LA Times. And he's actually looking for conservatives now to write for them. He just added Mark Andreessen to the board of the LA Times, who is like a tech bro who kind of came to the right and, now is like firmly on our side. And so that was an incredible shift that started happening right after the election. And it was shocking. Like, and the owner of the LA Times has now been on Fox News talking about this, trying to make the paper more centrist, allowing different views to be heard, which is fine. I mean, it's still a majority, liberal place. It's never going to be, Houston or whatever. So that was an incredible shift. And here's the thing though, a lot of people who don't live in California, they always tell me like, get out, screw California. We don't need it. Forget California. It's a lost cause. Like, why are you even wasting your time there? Don't worry about it. Okay. Now, is turning California red a lost cause? Is it going to vote for JD Vance in 2028? No. Okay. That's not happening. However, if you saw the map in November, what happened with the election is that huge swaths of California that were blue turned red, mostly in the central and like Riverside County, and blue areas turned a lot less blue. They turned a lot redder. Here's why we need California. We need it because without the California representatives, we lose the House. So you need Republicans here voting for representatives in Orange County and all those red areas. We need those people. If we don't have that, that's the edge that gave us the House. And so if you let California go totally, then you lose the House forever, like forever, because there's just so many people here. There are so many people here that it is important. There are more Republicans and Trump voters who live in California than live in like the 20 smallest states combined. I have a lot of right-wing friends. There are Twitter anons I know who are all over LA, who are displaced right now. We're here. Like, we're out here. And so I'm not saying Texans and Floridians should like rush back to California to save it, but it is worth the people who are still here. We survived the COVID filter for various reasons. We couldn't leave because of family, older parents like I have, jobs that it could not move, our children's communities. A lot of people made a choice, in 2020. I'm going to stay. I'm going to stick it out, see what happens. And we really need these people. Like, we do. And California is just too important in terms of the numbers, the sheer numbers, and keeping the House. So I do think it is worth trying to fight and keep what we can. And like, for example, growing the OC. I encourage people who want to get out from under the thumb of someone like Karen Bass, move to Orange County, move to a redder area, or support those places, because that's where the rebirth will start.
If you're in these scenarios where kind of the thin veil of civility kind of falls away, again, I'm in Florida. I've been through a number of hurricanes, and have been through some that completely, took out the power. People were losing their homes. I mean, you were talking about, returning to your home and not knowing if you're homeless, right? Like, I have been in that scenario where you're driving in, every street before you got there is underwater. You're sure that your house is going to be toast. We were incredibly blessed, and we're the only house on the street that did not flood in the last big hurricane.
Wow.
But it really is a devastating thing. A lot of people will look and they'll be like, oh, people in California, you're rich or whatever. It's just stuff. It's like, no, it's your home. Like, and it's a place that your kids grew up in, your family has been to, you have cultivated relationships there. You have built, a network of people that you care about. Yes, it's physically a building, but it's so much more. And if you haven't been in that scenario, you just don't know. The emotional gut punch can be really, really difficult. And you also have that scenario. I know, like you said, looting was a big problem. And again, we're in a scenario where we had looters pulling people out of cars and stuff at stop signs or stoplights and stuff. You just blew through because you didn't want to be in that scenario. You didn't go anywhere without a gun. And our sheriff specifically said, looters who show up here will be shot dead. Like, we encourage, we encourage our citizens to protect themselves. And if you try to steal something in this area of Florida, then you're not walking away, which is exactly what you want to hear from a sheriff in that area. California, obviously a different scenario. What has been the response to the looting? And do you feel like, a state that is known for its ignoring law and order, allowing people to shoplift and live in the streets, these kind of things, will this kind of bring that into sharper focus, do you think?
It's so ironic seeing Gavin Newsom saying, looters will not be tolerated. No crime will be tolerated. We will arrest you for looting. It's legal in California to loot anything you want, any store you want, any house you want, rob it, loot it. If the value of the things that you steal is under like $950,
right.
That's only a misdemeanor. And that's why we had these gangs going into Sephora and Ulta and Nordstrom and your home and just getting whatever they could if it was under $950. And even if they caught you, you could do that over and over again. It was just a misdemeanor every single time. And so they have these gangs, like 20 people, and they never bothered to catch them. And so that law actually just got overturned in November. And so it's very ironic. And the hypocrisy is sick that he's now saying looting will not be tolerated. And so, okay, well, how about it wasn't also in 2020? Like, how come? Why is it only now? Because your elite donor base, in the Democratic Party donor base in the Palisades and Brentwood, those people are really pissed off. they're in rental houses in Palm Springs and Montecito, and they're really mad at you. So now you're going to say you're protecting their houses. I will say that the sheriff department in LA has traditionally been kind of like, right wing. Although the new Sheriff Luna, is not as, he's a liberal, but the last sheriff was pretty based. The sheriff department tends to be much more kind of like hardcore, more traditional, and they're the ones up here patrolling Altadena. And I know that they are arresting people who are. They arrested some guy with a drone. They arrested people just walking around like looky-loos, and they're arresting looters. Although they did find someone, the police found someone in the valley, an illegal immigrant with like a blowtorch and some matches and some like flames or lighter fluid. The citizens arrest, it was online. They took him down. The citizens of the valley, that neighborhood, took him down in a residential neighborhood, and the police did not charge him with arson, and he's not being deported. And so you have the LAPD just business as usual, sanctuary city rules. So until we see Gavin Newsom actually like rescind those laws, the sanctuary city laws, and frankly cracking down on the homeless, because as we know, 80% of the fires in SoCal are arson. And a lot of that is the homeless camps all up and down these hills. And I'm pretty sure that when they investigate the Altadena fire, which started apparently at Altadena Drive and Midwick Drive, right next to the Eaton Canyon trailhead. I've seen on Nextdoor all these people who live there for like a couple years now reporting a homeless camp in the Eaton Canyon trailhead kind of ravine. And they would find garbage and beer bottles and all this stuff down in there. So I'm fairly certain that is what happens. People see the wind, these schizophrenic, these drug addicts, and they think it's fun to light something on fire. And so, and that's firmly the fault of the city, the county, for letting people camp outside. And just yesterday, I drove down Lake Avenue to Target to get some water because we can't drink the water in my house. We're allowed to bathe in it apparently, but who knows what diseases we'll get in a couple years. But driving down Lake Avenue, you could just see so many people still passed out on the street, like the usual homeless junkies. They're still there. The winds did not wash them away.
Yeah, it is amazing, when you allow vagrancy, when you allow these situations where people are regularly living on the streets or camping out in areas, you're going to end up, as you point out, with, you obviously have crazy people, and they'll just light things on fire because they're crazy. They're mentally ill. They're out there. They think it's funny. They get a firebug, but also just running, fire barrels and campfires and all these things that are constantly being introduced in the environment. And then, as you point out, you have illegal immigrants who are literally arsonists who are running around, possibly, lighting fires. And there's just no response from the local, departments. And that this is terrible. I mean, we just had, people have already forgotten this, but we just had an illegal immigrant lighting a woman on fire and burning her to death in New York on the subway. It's just basic stuff like this, whether that one individual is personally responsible for the wildfires in California or not, he just shouldn't be here. There's just no reason for this animal to be running around and adding to the pain and suffering of people who are going through horrific times, for his own amusement. But when you're always going to have people who are supposed to be here who are doing the wrong thing, homeless, arsonists, like that can always happen. But obviously the people who should not be here at all, when they're piling in on top of that and they're not accountable, there is, most of the time they're ignored by the justice system. When they are caught, like you said, not going to be deported, getting lesser charges so that they don't look bad on criminal reports, these kind of things. It's just a recipe for disaster. And, Ron DeSantis just announced that he is going to be taking action to make sure that mass deportations can be more smoothly enacted in Florida. Obviously, I'm not expecting that from Gavin Newsom, but do you think we'll see more kind of red state governors recognize the importance of this and get on board with facilitating that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, it's really funny seeing actually video of Gavin Newsom. You can see that he's panicking. You can see that, I think he knows he's cooked a little bit, and then he's going to have to find a way to get himself out of this mess and deflect all the blame. He'll deflect it onto the black female mayor of LA if he can. But LA is a very unique case because it's like decades and decades of mismanagement by, it's well known that there's sort of like a Chicano cartel that runs the city government, that runs the county. They're all cousins.
Well, may have lost Peachy there for a second. I know her.
Oh, back?
Oh, there you go. Yeah, you cut out when you were saying there was a cartel running the local politics there.
Yeah, I think they're probably about to maybe my Wi-Fi is burning down.
Well, they got to you. They know that you're informing us, and so yeah,
that's right.
Shut it down. Yeah.
So LA City is a really hard nut to crack, and the key will be if any of these people face any repercussions. If Gavin Newsom, Karen Bass, the LA County Board of Supervisors, I think they're called, they're just the worst bunch of crony, basically socialists who have been running the city, and no one cares because everyone's just like has their latte, then their Range Rover. No one pays attention. But until you can reform them, nothing will change. The fire department is totally beholden to the left-wing mayor and this left-wing city council. I think there's one Republican on the city council, but she's like barely a Republican, and these are people are so entrenched. It's like the deep state. Like California has its own deep state, and it's going to be very hard to dislodge. But yeah, deportations, I think if they don't happen here, look, my advice to red state people, red state governors, tell the illegals in your states to send everybody to LA. I think it may have the same effect that it had on New York City. Like, I don't want this personally, but I think nothing will change. And you have to kind of hit rock bottom. You know what I mean? In order to go get heal and quit your addiction to illegal immigrants. Red state governors, tell everybody in your state, go to California and just give them Gavin Newsom's home address. He just bought a $9 million mansion in Marin County. Give them his address, give them Karen Bass's address, and let's see what happens if they wake up and there's 10,000 Venezuelans on their front lawn.
Well, and they're still closer to the border that way. It's not like you're sending them to New York, so they're still relatively geographically close. You can when LA finally wakes up, they don't have to go far.
Well, they'll feel right at home in LA. Trust me.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, Peachy, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Let me see if we have any questions from the people. But before we go, I know you've obviously already got one book out. Did I hear you're writing another one? You're in the process of another book, or?
Yeah, my new book is called Supervillains. I'm writing it for Passage Press this time, and it is going to be another nonfiction book. And I'm sure it will touch on a lot of these issues. It's literally about our favorite supervillains.
Excellent. Well, besides the looking for the new book, is there anywhere else you want to point people? Substack or Twitter or anything else you want people to check out?
Yeah, my Substack is peachykeenan.com. You can subscribe. I have free and paid posts. I would love you guys to read some of my articles there. I'm going to be posting about the fire. And then this weekend, I'm going to DC. I'm going to dust the ashes off my gown. I'm going to DC to some parties there, and hopefully we'll witness the inauguration and get to write about that too. So actually, I'm very excited about that.
Oh yeah, Passage Press has the ball going over there, right? You're going to be over at that?
That's right. I will be at the coronation ball in my full coronation garb.
There you go. Very nice. All right, guys. Well, make sure you check out Peachy's stuff. And of course, if it's your first time on this channel, you need to subscribe on YouTube, click the bell notifications, all that stuff so you can catch us when we go live. If you'd like to get the broadcast as podcasts, then you need to subscribe to the Auron MacIntyre Show on your favorite podcast platform. And of course, my book, The Total State, just came out on audiobook a few weeks ago. So if you've been holding out until you could get a listen in, you can go check that out now. So make sure to pick that up. And don't forget, we also have merch now for the show in the merch store on the Blaze. So if you go to shop.blazemedia.com, you can pick something up and support the show there. Peachy, thank you again for coming on. Stay safe out there.
Well, thank you.
All right, guys. Thanks for watching. And as always, I'll talk to you next time.